You're not paid at all? Oh. All right, we've got to do it.
Hang on, that music sounds familiar. That's very familiar. It looks like I heard it on a journal or something. Home video. Two words which struck a chord with both distribution companies and cinema operators during the early 1980s. It both revolutionised and divided the industry in equal measure, setting a lot of conventions and standards that have been adhered to by every part of the industry to this day. Well, everyone except Netflix. But let's be real here, we've all had some experience with home video in our lives. But a lot of people don't actually know the full story of how films went from cinema to TV to literal cases on your shelves. It's about time someone actually did an episode of a YouTube series about it. So on this episode of The Journal, we're taking a ride in the Earl Grey powered time machine and having a look at how the format wars of the 1980s dictated the industry that we love so much today, and how it kick-started a period of time that I'm about to study quite in depth for my masters. Our story begins across the pond as the first home video hit shelves in 1977. No, it wasn't that. A company called Magnetic Video out of Michigan partnered up with Paramount to release a variety of their films on VHS and Betamax tapes, beginning what has now become a juggernaut of income for the movie studios themselves. Magnetic would soon be joined by a lot of the other Hollywood chains in joint ventures. MGM UA, Universal had their own wing, Fox had their own wing, Disney of course had Buena Vista. Come on, you wouldn't really use the Disney label on anything other than Disney. Eventually, all of Hollywood embraced this new opportunity to get films to the consumer in a very quick way. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that a lot of cinemas, especially here in the UK, were of the old school single screen picture palace mentality. Now, we mentioned two formats here. They were fighting for consumer approval. VHS with its cheaper cost but higher recording time, and Betamax, a more expensive tape but with better picture quality and a decrease in recording ability, were lobbied upon by the studios. VHS ultimately won this battle in the end, with Betamax going on to be used by TV stations for transmission masters because of that increase in picture quality. Back then, it was about as expensive, if not more, than today's 4K Blu-rays, beginning the age of rental stores like Blockbuster, and for us Brits of a certain age, choices where a lot of my youth was spent. Of course, he looked a little like this. Less than 480p quality. Yes, we are recreating it as best as we can for this journal. And the cost of these tapes were quite prohibitive at first, but as with a lot of good technology, prices would drop over time, making film that little bit more accessible. One of the advantages of home video was the ability to rewind and relive epic moments, making those stunts in the Bond films look even cooler as people figured out exactly how they were done. We also got the pause button, a button that would allow idiots to freeze frame a moment to spot continuity mistakes. I can see good money in TV shows about that topic.
Warning, the following movie mistakes were spotted by nerds. This is Mamma Mia. And Mamma Mia, this is a cowardly stuntman. You can see the cable holding him to the building. There. Honestly, mate, does your mother know?
However, perverts would also use that pause button as well. Especially in 1992, when a certain film and a certain scene would do the equivalent of what Kim Kardashian would call breaking the internet. And no, we're not going to show the Basic Instinct scene. We're clean-cut, wholesome content. We're not doing it. Another reason why the picture quality on VHS was so bad was because of three words which can instantly turn off a film fan: pan and scan. Because of the 4:3 aspect ratio, a lot of old school films, i.e. film shot in CinemaScope, the greatest format in the world, had to be cropped down not just for TV but for VHS too. And 9 times out of 10, the crop was done so badly. Some scenes were ruined, and I even had to manipulate the shots in clever ways in order to make it all fit on the screen. It's still kind of a relic in players like VLC and Power DVD to this day. But if you're watching a film on pan and scan, what are you even doing? Unless you're going for the full retro experience, then I don't blame you. Another aspect of the arrival of VHS was that this newfound innovation would lead to films that had been previously banned in the UK, namely horror films that had been terrorising audiences over in Europe, getting cult followings within that chunk of cineasts who yearn for their uncut, uncensored and, quite frankly, very unhinged movies. Stuff like Driller Killer, Cannibal Holocaust, and surprisingly Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead got a lot of press attention during this period because of parents who wanted to ensure that their children were viewing what's right for them. As a result, 72 titles became known by a very fear-mongering group as video nasties. They tried to control the supply of these 72 films under the Obscene Publications Act in 1982. That's a very good year for film. It's almost like we've done this joke before. But it wasn't enough, especially when, well... The press were actively looking for a scapegoat in this video nasty saga, running all sorts of smear articles and campaigns in an attempt to get the government to actually do something.
There is a tradition in the UK of blaming horror movies for crimes, which has often led to increased censorship.
And it took Tory MP for Luton South, Graham Bright, a bit of a task to lobby a private member's bill that would eventually go before government and change the face of the entire home video industry forever. 1984. It all changed here, as the UK government set about an act that will regulate the industry and bring in some decorum to the foreign VHS and Betamax tapes that have been coming in their thousands. The Video Recordings Act, a direct result of campaigning by infamous activist and the real Queen of Clean, Mary Whitehouse, ensured that every tape to receive a UK release had to go before a little group known back then as the British Board of Film Censors, who had quite enough on their plate already, just rating the amount of blockbusters that were coming into cinemas. The implementation of the Act had quite a knock-on effect on the entire industry. All video releases after September 1st of 1985 had to comply with the Act and be submitted for classification by the BBFC, and all videos that were released before that date had to go before the BBFC again within 3 years. This is how you control the entire market. And they changed their name. From their inception in 1912 all the way up to the launch of the VRA in 1985, the BBFC went under the name of the British Board of Film Censors. However, under their new role as the Legal Advisory Panel for Home Video, this name had to change. From that point onwards, they were known as the British Board of Film Classification, because they weren't censors anymore. They were acting as the gatekeepers of parental guidance. And this is really when the BBFC began to get super harsh on a lot of the films. James Furman can eat his heart out. They were brutal during the 80s, as the only ratings available to them at the launch of the VRA were U, PG, 15 and 18. 12 didn't exist for another 5 years, making its theatrical debut in 1989 with Tim Burton's version of Batman. It eventually hit VHS tapes in 1994, so a lot of the early 12s had to be cut for home video, starting the age of the director's cut. It was either trimming your film deliberately for cinemas and putting out your full, uncensored version on home video to add a little more premium content than just a generic trailer reel. BBC4 made a fantastic documentary a few years ago about the BBFC and the role that they had in the 80s cinema shift. Highly suggest you checking that one out. But back to our regularly scheduled programming. As a direct result of this influx of VHS popularity, the Americans had a very unique proposition in an attempt to get people going back to the movies. Cinema admissions had just hit record lows in 1984 of 54 million, a figure that we've not seen talked about that much since cinema had its big resurgence in the 21st century. But back then, something drastic was needed to turn the fortunes around. So a site in Milton Keynes was identified for what would become quite a first in the British exhibition sector.
Now then, a new entertainment complex called The Point has recently opened at Milton Keynes. It could mark the way ahead for the survival of the cinema in Britain. But most significant is the cinema complex, which offers 10 screens showing a variety of films, including blockbusters, children's features and art movies. The company behind the complex, American Multi-Cinema, AMC, has also introduced other transatlantic delights.
Taking a single-screen mentality that had defined three-pit cinema in England, multiplying it by 10 and adding a more diverse range of concessions, AMC, the current owners of Odeon, a company you're going to be hearing quite a lot about in 2020 if you live in Preston, opened up their first UK cinema in 1985, just in time for the greatest film ever made.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Sorry, had to mention it. Still a PG to this day, over 35 years on. Of course, VHS and the age of 4 unique TV channels here in the UK added an extra challenge to the operations of AMC at the time. But as the blockbusters came in, more of these multiplexes popped up, including 2 very particular sites in 1990 and 1991 respectively. They look familiar. And sure, VHS was a big deal back then, but cinema began to fight back in style. These multiplexes provided a much-needed boost to the admissions, keeping our palaces of the big screen alive by the skin of their teeth. VHS would remain the king until the 1990s arrived. A new, more durable, more compact medium to enjoy movies was in development, and this one truly would be a game changer. But as you'd expect, the music industry had the last laugh. They beat us to the mark by a good few years. Typical.
The surface is covered by a layer of transparent plastic, so you don't have to worry about grubby fingers or even scratches.
Enter the DVD. Higher resolution, Dolby and DTS digital surround sound. And importantly, the arrival of anamorphic widescreen allowed film fans a much better way to get the cinema experience they yearn for, but in their own homes. Again, early DVDs were expensive, and there was a small matter of competition from Laserdisc, for which a YouTube channel called Techmoan has made a lot of videos about. And believe me, I've binged a lot of them over the years. The advantage over VHS, compared to other formats, was a little value enhancer that they called the bonus feature. These are your blooper reels, your director's cuts, your trailers, your commentaries. This is where premium content came to roost. These became a staple of the format. Alternative audio tracks, behind-the-scenes featurettes, trailers, and in some cases, completely different versions of the film. It was amazing. I could actually watch something like Memento in chronological order. Made it easy to understand. The bonus features were nerd heaven. They gave us an unprecedented level of access into the making of a movie, something which not many people have had the honour of doing. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. And the mug too. And things like the gag reel became a common feature amongst many releases as we left the 1990s and entered the age of Y2K. VHS would still remain a dominant player until the late 2000s, but it was the launch of the PlayStation 2 that really changed things to the advantage of DVD. Sony's Gaming Goliath was the first machine to bring a reasonably priced player to the masses, as it combined gaming and movies for the same price point as a standalone DVD player when it launched. And while you had to buy a separate adapter in order to enable the functionality for Microsoft's Xbox, the PlayStation 2 and its all-inclusive manner marked the turning point for the industry in its shift to an all-digital future. And it also helped the PlayStation 2 to casually become the highest selling video games console of all time. Now, we were late adopters of DVD here at Smith HQ. I remember the moment when I was much younger when the latest Cyber Home player got set up in the living room. We weren't really that big on tech back then. So it was a big deal when we went from the old clunky VHS format to the newly launched plastic discs, for which we had many of in a smaller capacity, thanks to the Nintendo GameCube we had upstairs for those awesome weekend sessions of Super Smash Bros. I got my own mini setup in 2004, around the time I walked in to a certain cinema for the first time, and it spoke volumes about the implementation of the technology. Manufacturers finally had faith in DVD. So like those combinations of the 80s, TV companies were selling units with both analog transmission and an entry-level DVD player built into them. That isn't to say I didn't have VHS too, because the old Bush player came up to my room, providing many hours of entertainment and joy from a variety of BBFC certificated movies. Yeah, watching Dude Where's My Car at that age wouldn't have been a good idea if I knew I'd actually meet someone called Zoltan. But one downside though is that they were easier to pirate, even with the levels encryption that the Hollywood bigwigs had insisted upon. So they decided to skip these unskippable pieces of shit. Crabverts on a mainline journal? What the hell is going on? The MPAA launched a huge campaign in 2004 in an attempt to circumvent the illegal trade of movies, something which had been a problem since the 80s. And, well, this is their best effort. Oh great, here we go. Well, I don't drive. And I have no intention of stealing a handbag. And I've already got a television, MPAA. But the nerve on you to steal 46 seconds of my time, you stupid Hollywood bureaucrat! It's an important point, but if the urban legends to be believed, they pirated this music! Doesn't make sense. But behind the scenes, another format war was brewing. The industry was getting ready to shift towards a 1080p high-definition future. And as a result, the next generation of video games consoles were all out in their attack. PlayStation-backed Blu-ray. Meanwhile, the Xbox camp in Redmond foolishly backed HD DVD. And I think you all know how that one ended up. DVD would remain the king until 2006, when these things arrived. Blu-rays. Even higher resolution, uncompressed Dolby and DTS surround sound, and importantly the arrival of true high-definition cinema quality imagery allowed film fans the best way to get the cinema experience they craved in their own homes. Wasn't quite the same quality as a CinemaSpec DCP, which was already on its way to 4K back then, but it was damn close. I mean, I even have a 5.1 surround sound rig in this room, because why not? But these Blu-rays gave us remasters, added features. Blu-ray Live became a thing as well. That died a death after a few years, didn't it? Internet connected film? Ugh, never work. But the added bonus, you get to assemble collections like this. And yeah, that's all I need to say. That's got one benefit about actual physical media rather than streaming. You actually get to hold the films. It's not like I've held a DCP or anything like that. Been to a projection room and everything. It's handy that I mention a DCP, or as we call it in the trade, a digital cinema package. Now, we've mentioned before that this is cinema quality imagery, although it's not quite as good as what the cinemas are getting. Your average Blu-ray movie comes in at around 15 gigabytes, give or take. But a full-blown digital cinema package, which has your surround sound, your subtitles, in some cases 3D, can be upwards of 10 times that. To give you an idea of perspective, the file that American cinemas were sent for Avatar in 3D over 10 years ago now, yes, it's been a decade since Avatar, was 276 gigabytes. In the interest of fairness though, Avengers came in at around 237 gigabytes for its 3D version, so that gives you an idea of how big they are. These cinema releases have to carry a lot more information than the Blu-ray. Dolby Atmos tracks for both 5.1 and 7.1. Subtitles, 3D versions in some hard drive cases, and also, that's how cinemas get their hands on the trailers. They've got to try and fit them all on as many drives as they can. It's the reason why film died a death. I could easily do a rant about that sort of thing in a dedicated journal further down the line. Stay tuned for that one. But Blu-ray was about as close as you could get to having the full cinema experience in your own home without shelling out over £107,000 for a Sony Digital Cinema 4K projector, a Dolby CP750 sound processor, and bi-amped Dolby 7.1 surround sound. That rig sounds very familiar, am I right, View Crew? This shift towards high-definition content prompted the studios to go back into their archive and remaster films that they think were more suited to a high-definition format. And 96% of the time, the results are fantastic. You get classic films with new 5.1 and 7.1 surround tracks, 1080p visuals, and a lot of new bonus content. What's not to like? But when it comes to remasters, sometimes the results can't be as fruitful. Take 1959 French film Breathless. This is a digitally remastered copy. And to give you a rough idea, it's got commentaries, trailers. This is the embodiment of what a Blu-ray can be. It's even got like proper bonus features in here and everything. Nice little booklet. I had to pick this up for my college work back in the day. But of course, you're limited by your source material. Soundtrack on this thing's only mono. I know. But on the bright side, having Blu-ray to hand means you have good reference copies of all of your films, as long as you treat them with respect and dignity and don't pirate them. And seriously, don't pirate them. One thing that has remained a constant throughout the format wars is the practice of taking films that are so horribly bad that they don't deserve a cinema release, putting them cheaply onto home video and sticking them out for people to watch all over the world. And that, handily, is the topic of our next episode of the Journal. It is about time we ripped into some of the worst films I have ever seen. This is what to look forward to in part 2 of season 2. Now, a friend of mine from Newcastle suggested that I watch a film called Hustlers to make a dedicated journal about it. Jesus Christ! Looks like something out of Black Mirror. 2001 called it wants its cliched plot devices back. This history of cinema thing we've been working on is quite simply something that hasn't been done in over 30 years. If he's ranting this much, it's gotta be something brutal. So, is physical media still the king? You know my answer if you look behind me, but let us know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, well, it's not go away, it's see you next month, and we'll see you at the movies.
This film has been classified PG. That stands for parental guidance, which means that parents might want to check up on it before showing it to their younger children. If it's an action film, it might have some violence. If it's romantic, it might have some sexy scenes or very brief nudity. It might also have some of the milder swear words. Video certificates are there to give you the chance to make an informed choice. They allow you to have peace of mind and be entertained. Thanks for listening.